Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me in the Bettor's Box. It's BangTheBook.com's MLB betting podcast for Thursday, April 25th. I am your host, Adam Burke. This and every edition of the Bettor's Box presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB and the number 200 is that promo code. Get you a 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. Monday, Thursday format with the Bettor's Box, as you know. Next Tuesday, we'll have Brian Blessing join us for a Kentucky Derby podcast. We'll take a look at the horses in the field. We'll probably talk about the Kentucky Oaks as well as some of the other races if he's got his eye on some contenders in those. The one thing that will be a little bit of a challenge is that I believe the post draw will not have been done yet. So maybe Tuesday won't be the day for that. Maybe we'll push that back a little bit. Wait and see if we get a post draw. But in any event, I'll talk to Brian. I'll see what works with his schedule. We will have a Kentucky Derby show next week. We'll see what day that winds up being. Over at BangTheBook.com, I'll have a Kentucky Derby preview after the post draw, so you'll get my thoughts on that race. Really love digging into horse racing. It's a nice change of pace for me. So we're looking forward to doing that, and also I'll have a preview of the Kentucky Oaks up over at BangTheBook.com. Also, Parker Michaels will have a second-round preview here for you today of the NHL playoffs. We'll have NBA series for the second round, as well as game previews from our talented cast of writers for all of those series. Don't forget, on Monday, new edition of the Bettor's Box with a Monday mailbag. So lots of stuff going on here. I never sleep. We never get a chance to have a whole lot of downtime in this business with sports just going from season to season, and then obviously the different events across golf and NASCAR and all that. NASCAR previews up today at BangTheBook.com as well. So lots of stuff going on. Make sure you head on over there and check it all out. All right, we'll talk beyond the box score here on today's show, give you an exit velocity update, go down the lines, I'll give you a pick for tonight, and then take a preview here of the weekend. So we look to go beyond the box score here. This will be a little bit rapid fire in nature. 4 series I'm going to touch on here real quickly, beginning with the Cardinals sweep of the Brewers. You know, the Brewers started 8-2 in their first 10 games. Now they're 13-13. Over their last 6 games, they've allowed a .565 ERA, 26 homers, 21 doubles. And you sort of have to wonder here with Brewers. You know, they went higher upside in the rotation. They went Corbin Burnes. They went with Freddie Peralta. Didn't really work out all that well. Now Peralta's on the DL. Chase Anderson gave him 5 very good innings against the Dodgers here this past week. But you sort of wonder if teams have adjusted to that contact management game plan, if this is just individual regression for some guys, if this is the juiced ball, if this is just variance, if this is just a lack of command early on in the season. But the Brewers were thought to be kind of skating by with some smoke and mirrors in the sabermetric community. Not a whole lot of people buying into that contact management style, the low ERA, the high FIP, the high XFIP. A lot of people were pegging this team for regression last year. They didn't regress and, in fact, got better. This year, maybe, things do look a little bit different here. The bullpen depth is a bigger question at this point in time. And obviously, with the starting staff here and some of the issues that they've had so far, you do kind of wonder. And Christian Yelich is really carrying this Brewers offense here. Over their last 16 games offensively, 155 strikeouts, only 45 walks, striking out way too much, 8 straight games with double-digit Ks. You really worry about the Brewers here right now. I think they're in kind of an interesting spot where this season's sort of setting up to go one of 2 ways. Either they'll figure this thing out and they'll wind up being a contender there in the Central Division, or they won't figure this thing out and could very well be a team with a losing record this year. So I'll be very curious to see what the Brewers do going forward. I'll be watching them very closely because they are a team I've made a lot of money on here over the last couple of years, but it looks like there may be some reversals for them this season. They only had 6 at-bats with a runner in scoring position in that series against the Cardinals. St. Louis, on the other hand, had 30. And the Cardinals offense really getting on track. And also, they've figured some things out with this starting rotation as well. Adam Wainwright's pitched pretty well over his last few outings, finding a way to make the bullpen work. But I think Andrew Miller needs to go into low leverage. I don't think he's a guy that you want in the 7th or the 8th inning right now. So I think they need to do some bullpen shifting. We'll see how they do with that. But give them credit for figuring out this starting staff, really getting things going in a positive direction. They've got good depth there with guys like Ponce de Leon, with Gomber, with Dakota Hudson. with Michael Wacha, who obviously doesn't give them a whole lot of innings. But, if I'm the Cardinals right now, I try to set this thing up like the Los Angeles Dodgers. Outslug everybody and try to get, 125, 130 innings out of 6 or 7 different starting pitchers. I think that's really what St. Louis needs to do at this point in time. Isolate the guys that you think can be those starters, put the other guys in the bullpen and add some reinforcements there. I think the Cardinals have a very high upside going forward if they manage things in a proper way. The Rockies took 2 out of 3 from the Nationals. I mentioned that at home, it's probably about time to back the Rockies here, especially against contact-oriented starting pitchers. Of course, now they go out on the road here starting on Friday. But, they hit Jeremy Hellickson and Anibal Sanchez around. They got Daniel Murphy back for the last game of that series. They did lose to Patrick Corbin, which a lot of teams will do. But the Rockies, I think offensively, they're kind of finding a little bit of a groove now with Charlie Blackmon getting going. Now with Murphy back, you can move Trevor Story around the lineup a little bit. David Dahl also back in the lineup. Rael Tapia is actually hitting this season. So I think the Rockies have a lot of things going for them in a positive direction, at least at home. Again, the Coors Field effect on the road does have an impact on them offensively. We'll see how they fare in these next upcoming series on the road. But I do think that the Rockies right now, are a little bit of a bye team offensively, and in particular when they're at home. The Padres swept the 2-gamer from Seattle here, but it wasn't really as impressive as it would seem. They did touch up Eric Swanson in the 3rd inning. That was one where we had Seattle for the first 5, but that was the only bad inning that he had. And then Felix Hernandez was dominant against them yesterday. He threw 7 innings across 75 pitches. He was absolutely incredible in that start. The Padres did win that game 1-0, but this is another set of examples here of how much the Padres can struggle against any right-handed pitcher with average or better breaking ball. Adam Wainwright shut them down. Felix Hernandez shut them down. Obviously, pitchers with higher ceilings will do that. Swanson just didn't have the right depth to his arsenal. He's a 70% fastball guy. The command of that pitch is okay. That was a misstep on my part. But this will continue to be a thing for the Padres. With average or better breaking balls or off-speed stuff, we will still get a lot of opportunities to go against them for the first 5. And in fact, as I'll talk about here later in the show, a couple of intriguing opportunities here this weekend as they take on the Washington Nationals. Nick Margevicius, still a regression candidate. I'm still looking to go against him. He'll make his next start on Monday in Atlanta, barring any postponements or anything with his side session or anything like that. I will be on Atlanta in that game. That'll be Margevicius against Mike Soroka. Soroka pitched very well yesterday against the Reds. But Margevicius, 9 base runners in his 5 innings, only gave up 2 runs, walked 5. He's made some mistakes in the middle of the plate that just haven't fully affected him yet. I will definitely be looking at Atlanta on Monday and at looking for opportunities to fade Margevicius, especially if he pitches in places that aren't good pitchers' parks where, some of those fly balls that he does allow could wind up being a little bit more detrimental. Finally, one more series to take a look at here. The Astros taking 2 out of 3 from the Twins. And not that that's a big surprise, but the Astros, with their starting lineup yesterday, 7 of 9 guys slugging over 500 on the season for the Astros. This is a very, very good lineup. I'm not sure that we've fully realized and fully grasped just how good this lineup is. Adding Michael Brantley to the middle, who's off to a fantastic start. Carlos Correa appears to be healthy. Jose Altuve is healthy. This is a phenomenal lineup. And I talked about this coming into the season that, I felt that the Astros would be more of an over team because, they lost some of the back end of their starting staff to injury and also free agency. They're hitting the cover off the ball right now. And maybe this is a byproduct of Minute Maid Park playing a little bit smaller here in the month of April with the roof open. Maybe that's an angle to consider a little bit more for next season with their totals. As it closes up, as the weather gets hotter, as it gets boxed in a little bit, the ball doesn't carry nearly as well. So this is something to keep in mind for this year in that the Astros are having tons of offensive success right now. They've played a series in Texas. They've played at home where the ball carries a lot better with the roof open. Maybe as we get deeper into the season here, we'll have some inflated totals on Astros games. I won't be doing it here over the next little while, but as we get into the warmer months of the summer, I think that their totals, may be a little bit too high for some of their home games in particular. And again, next year in April, I'm definitely going to consider some more overs with them as that roof is open there at Minute Maid Park. Should be open tonight, by the way, for the heavyweight fight between Trevor Bauer and Garrett Cole that I'll talk about later on in the show. One thing I did want to take a look at here, some early season numbers with runners in scoring position. Last year, the league average was a 254 average, 339 on base, 414 slugging, with a 319 WOBA. And I've talked about this a lot here where you want to look for outliers. You want to look for things that are going to regress towards the league average, whether they're on the high side or on the low side. Last year, the teams that were plus or minus 10 points in WOBA, weighted on base average, the Red Sox were at 365, Astros 360, Twins 345, Braves and A's 337, Yankees and Rockies 330. So those were the teams, I believe that's 7 of them, that were on the plus 10 side of weighted on base average with runners in scoring position. So again, a lot of teams fall into a certain range, usually somewhere around 305 to 320 in weighted on base average with runners in scoring position, at least relative to the run environment from last year where we had fewer walks and we had fewer home runs. The bottom teams last year, the Padres 283, Giants 287, Orioles 290, Marlins 291, White Sox 293, Tigers 297, Cubs and Mariners at 303, Royals at 304. Obviously what you see here, a lot of bad teams at the bottom of that list. Those are teams, again, weighted on base average assigns run values to each outcome of reaching base, where walks don't count the same as home runs, singles don't count the same as doubles. A lot of times teams are very bad because they don't hit for power, and especially in this current run environment. So they're not hitting the doubles and the home runs. They may be okay from an average standpoint, but they're not slugging the ball with men in scoring position. So that's why they carry those lower WOBA marks. So again, not a whole lot of surprises there. The Cubs, a little bit of a surprise down there at 303 last season, but a lot of those teams were just bad offensive teams. So we look at 2019 here. League batting average up 2 points at 256. On base percentage up 10 points to 349. Slugging percentage up 16 points, to 430. So walks and home runs most definitely up league-wide. League-wide batting, or WOBA, with runners in scoring position is 327. We have a lot of outliers early on in the year. The Phillies at 378, Brewers and Diamondbacks 376, Twins 372, Nationals 369, Mariners 368, Rangers 366. All of those teams higher than the top team from last year. And yes, the top team from this year probably will be a little bit higher because of the additional walks and home runs league-wide, but we're still not going to see 7 teams higher than the number 1 team from last year. So you'd want to look for some offensive regression in these high-leverage situations from teams like the Phillies, from teams like the Brewers and Diamondbacks, from teams like the Twins, the Nationals, the Mariners, the Rangers. You would expect those teams to fall off a little bit, regress down towards the league average. And a lot of times, and one of the things that makes baseball handicapping so difficult is that a lot of times you've got, maybe 15 combined plate appearances with the runner in scoring position, maybe a little bit higher with today's run environment. That dictates the game right there. So if you've got teams in line for some negative regression in these run-scoring situations, those are teams you probably do want to look to fade here in the near term. So again, the Phillies, the Brewers, Diamondbacks, Twins, Nationals, Mariners, and Rangers, all teams that I would expect some regression from offensively with runners in scoring position. The other teams that are outside of that 10-point range, Cubs, Dodgers, and Blue Jays. The Blue Jays are a massive fade candidate. I'll talk about them in a minute. The bottom teams here are weighted on base average. A lot of the usual suspects, a lot of teams you would expect. The Marlins at 241. The Rockies you wouldn't expect at 267. And again, I think offensively they're going to start to get it going here. The Rockies are a buy team for me. More so at home, but I think they will be undervalued a little bit on the road as well. Tigers 272, Giants 279, Angels 285, the Reds at 286. Offensively, the Reds should get better here sooner rather than later. Padres 294, Pirates 295. The Rays at 297 is an interesting one, but they don't hit a lot of home runs. They hit a lot of singles. Again, that doesn't really help you as much from a weighted on base average standpoint. Then finally, the Braves at 306. So again, I talk about degrees of regression. The overlying point here with a lot of these numbers I talk about is that teams are going to regress towards the league average. That is the expectation. The degree to which that regression happens is largely dependent on the team and the team's talent level. A team like the Rockies, they've got a good offense. They're going to get better. A team like the Marlins, they'll get better, but probably not to the degree of a team like the Rockies or the Reds or even the Angels for that matter. So you want to put these in the proper context of all of these teams will get better. Some of them will get much better than others is basically what I'm looking at here. And again, as sample sizes increase, we're looking for more long-term buying opportunity. And I think that there are some with some of these teams. Now, let's look at batting average on balls in play with runners in scoring position. The Blue Jays are at .421. That is not sustainable at all whatsoever. The highest team in batting average on balls in play with runners in scoring position last year was the Twins at .330. The Blue Jays are at .421. They are going to regress. Now, of course, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is now coming up, so he'll certainly help the offense a little bit. But the other guys around him are going to regress in these run-scoring situations. So the Blue Jays are a fade team going forward. We saw many people on the Giants against the Blue Jays here in that two-game series. Again, the Giants at the bottom of a lot of these categories, the Blue Jays at the top of some of these categories. Again, you expect that regression towards the league average. You would expect the Blue Jays to come down, the Giants to come up. The Giants wind up winning both of those games there in Toronto. Indians have a .363 BABIP, Nationals .358, Phillies .346, Rangers .340. Again, teams I would expect some negative regression from in these high leverage plate appearance situations with men in scoring position. Now the bottom five here, the Angels at .220, the Reds at .233. Again, their offense is too good to be as bad as it has been. Giants .246, Padres .258, Rockies .268. I think all five of those teams are teams in line for some positive regression offensively here. And again, that's what the numbers would play out in terms of their performance with runners in scoring position. Now again, you've got a range here of .421 to .220 in BABIP. At the end of last season, the highest was the Twins at .330, as I mentioned. The lowest was the Padres, .281. Again, I will repeat that. Blue Jays at .421 this year. Angels at .220. The highest and the lowest last year, Twins at .330, Padres at .281. So again, we're looking for the expectation of regression with teams falling back into the league average range with the normal range of outcomes that's usually out there. Again, it's April. It's very early. The season isn't even a month old. So we're going to have some of those outliers, but these are things that you want to pick on as the season goes along because they are going to regress, whether it's positively or negatively, towards the league average. So we take a look here at exit velocity and this week's update. Always talk about exit velocity updates. The league batting average on batted balls of 95 plus miles per hour has gone up 3 points from 527 to 530. Part of this probably has to do with the weather getting better in a lot of different places. Balls are carrying a little bit more. Maybe guys are making some adjustments to their swings, because they're seeing what's going on here around the league. But again, the league batting average, 530 on batted balls of 95 plus miles per hour. The Diamondbacks, number one at 630, minus 17 points from last week, down 31 points over the last 2 weeks. This will be a common theme. And again, speaks to everything I've been talking about here about teams and individuals regressing towards the league average in a lot of these departments. The Mariners at 604, that's down 17 points from last week, down 37 points from the last 2 weeks. The Braves at 581, up 3 points here this week. So some positive outcomes for them on high velocity contact. That's not a big surprise. They're a very, very talented offensive team. The Yankees to 570, that's down 26 points from last week, down 49 points the last 2 weeks. And obviously a lot of that has to do with injuries. They'll be a top 5 team throughout the year, but with their injury situations and an entire lineup on the disabled list, obviously we're seeing some regression for them. The Cardinals, they dropped 30 points here this week on batting average and high velocity contact. The Giants, 459, still bringing up the rear, but plus 4 points from last week, up 13 points the last 2 weeks. The Red Sox at 470, up 4 points from last week. Okay, I still think positive regression most definitely coming for Boston sooner rather than later. The Detroit Tigers up to 470, up 46 points from last week in batting average on 95-plus mile-per-hour batted balls, up 77 points over the last 2 weeks. Marlins up 25 points to 475. They're up 50 points over the last 2 weeks. And the Mets up to 476 plus 7 points. So again, you see why I'm talking about this. The outliers regress towards the league average. If you're on the high side, you're coming down. If you're on the low side, you're going up. So what that means for us from a betting standpoint is, again, maybe you look to go against some of those high side teams with team totals or look to fade them altogether. You know, the Diamondbacks here this week taking on the Cubs when they get back home, I would expect them to keep going down. So that's an angle that you may want to look to consider here. Maybe a series price on the Cubs, something like that. You know, series prices have a little bit less variance to them because you're not betting 3 individual games. You're betting a series of 3 games and just picking, you know, who wins that series. There are some series price opportunities here in looking at some of these teams. But this also illustrates what sample size means. Outliers are starting to go away. That means that as we get an increased sample size into the month of May, we can start playing on or against those significant outliers that are still out there. So again, sample size really matters a lot from a regression analysis handicapping standpoint, which, again, I'm not going to make excuses for myself, but I guess it's not that big of a surprise that I struggle in the month of April and also struggle in the month of September with call-ups. But the middle portion of the year, usually when I've done my best work, because we can prey on these outliers and these things that significantly stand out from the crowd. So we're starting to see some of those outliers going away here a little bit. The league average weighted on base average, again, WOBA, on batted balls of 95-plus miles per hour, up to 677. That's up 7 points from where it was last week. Once again, similar thing here. The Mariners at 846, they're down 7 points, down 36 points from the last 2 weeks. Diamondbacks down to 822, down 29 points from last week, down 67 points over the last 2 weeks. Cardinals down to 762. They jumped 91 points last week, came back 72 points this week. So this can be a little bit high variance at times. But the Twins, 734, they're into the top 5. They're figuring it out offensively, and furthermore, getting away from that cold weather at Target Field has been a big help for them. It was very bitter cold early on in the year. This is more like the true talent level of the Minnesota Twins offense. So there probably will be some situational spots against bad command pitchers, stuff like that, fly ball pitchers, to back the Twins here in the very near future. Yankees down to 733. It's a 19-point drop from last week, down 63 points from the last 2 weeks. The Tigers are at 564. They're at the bottom of the league, but they're up 68 points from last week and up 95 points from the last 2 weeks. Marlins at 564. They're up 25 points from last week, up 29 points the last 2 weeks. Giants up to 573. That's an 18-point increase from last week, up 50 points over the last 2 weeks. Red Sox plus 8, and the Indians down to 579. They're in the bottom 5, largely because they're not hitting home runs. If once they start hitting home runs, they'll be out of the bottom 5. But for right now, having some power troubles, so they find themselves down in the bottom 5. And again, you look at what's going on here. I would expect the Giants to keep increasing, the Red Sox to keep going up, the Indians to keep going up, the Mariners to keep coming down, the Diamondbacks to keep coming down. The Twins now showing their true talent level with warmer conditions. That was an offense a lot of people liked coming into the year. And again, we're seeing higher batting average on high-velocity contact, higher weighted on base average on high-velocity contact. It's warming up. That'll help some teams in cold weather environments. A team like the Twins, obviously, who's been on the rise here pretty regularly, over the last few weeks. So again, talking about a lot of numbers here, talking about a lot of conceptual things, but there's a method to the madness here in that we're looking for true talent levels. We're looking for positive and negative regression. We're looking at it relative to league average because you're going to see teams regress towards the league average, both on the high side and on the low side. And this will have continued betting impact for us over the course of the season. All right, let's go down the lines here. Take a look at some line moves dating back to Monday. We saw some Brad Keller love for the Royals against the Rays. Keller was a regression guy from an ERA to FIP to xFIP standpoint from last year, but the market's not following that traditional rule. And I'm kind of noticing here, and maybe I need to pivot, maybe I need to start looking at some different things, but I'm kind of noticing that we're not seeing those ERA, FIP, and xFIP moves to the same degree. And I think that people are finally starting to realize that some guys just aren't going to regress to the degree that we expect them to, whether it's positive or negative. And I think maybe I have a lot of thoughts running through my head on a daily basis of baseball, obviously. And if you listen to the show and if you read the article, maybe I'm overanalyzing some things here at this point in time during the season. And that is something I'm kind of struggling with here, trying to find that correct balance. But it seems like the markets have changed over the last couple of years, and maybe I'm not making the correct adjustments. So I'm doing a lot of evaluation here, and maybe there will be a few days coming up where I just decide, you know what, I'm just going to sit back and watch, and I'm just going to try to make some adjustments where I feel like I need to and see if I can get dug out of this hole. But again, the ERA xFIP thing in terms of getting out in front of line moves, it hasn't quite been the same. We've seen those initial moves, and we've seen a lot of buyback. And it's been just a different kind of market, a different kind of season. And like I said, maybe I just haven't properly adjusted, but getting out in front of that line value here with ERA and FIP and xFIP moves hasn't really had the same impact this season as it's had in past seasons. So a big move on Oakland at home against left-handed pitcher Mike Minor, as I talked about on Monday's show. The A's won easily there in that one. Now, I talk about ERA and FIP and xFIP moves not really having the same impact out there in the betting market, except for a guy like Trevor Williams. Money moved against him quite a bit here in Tuesday's start against the Diamondbacks. That was, I believe, Merrill Kelly going for the Diamondbacks there, or not Merrill Kelly. Actually escapes. Luke Weaver pitched for the Diamondbacks there in that game. Part of that was a move on Weaver. Part of that was a fade against Williams. Part of that was a fade against Starling Marte, which is why that line didn't come back up. When there are multiple factors, I think these ERA and FIP and xFIP moves are going to stick, but we'll see buyback if that's the only reason, with the arbitrage crowd, kind of leaking into the marketplace at that point in time. Saw money coming on Jeff Samardzija and the Giants against the Jays on Tuesday. As I mentioned, the Jays are a very big regression candidate at this point in time, both offensively and on the pitching side. Giants sweep that little two-gamer there. Saw money on the Giants in both of those games. Samardzija on Tuesday, Drew Pomeranz on Wednesday. Wednesday, we saw a fade of the Brewers, but that was because Christian Yelich was not in the lineup there for the Brewers, so that line moved down. Big money on German Marquez in that start for the Rockies against Anibal Sanchez. Partially a fade of Sanchez, but also a move on Marquez, who the market really likes at this point in time. We did see that fade of Jordan Lyles yesterday, and it did wind up being the correct side. I was dead wrong on that one, but the market definitely came in on Jordan Lyles there in that game, or came in against Jordan Lyles, in that game. Saw a big fade of Jason Vargas on Wednesday. That one wound up a winner. And as I mentioned, money came in against the Blue Jays to back Drew Pomeranz and the Giants. Thursday, we're not seeing the usual John Lester fade. In fact, we're seeing money on John Lester, which is very scary to say the least. I'm still against him for the first 5 in my article. But John Lester is a massive regression candidate. I don't know what's going on with that line move here this morning. And, it may have changed since I last looked, but I really don't get it. One other line move, or a couple other line moves here on Thursday. Seeing some big Aaron Nola money. That's against the Marlins. Nola has struggled so far this year, but the Marlins are just not a good team at all whatsoever. So we're seeing the market lay that big Aaron Nola line up over $2 here today. Seeing some money on Rick Porcello. That's a fade of the Detroit Tigers. And, I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that Porcello's not as bad as he's shown. I was correct to fade him early on in the season. I'm kind of taking a back seat with that now, as I expect him to find a little bit of positive regression here over the next little while. But money definitely coming in on Boston. And again, I think Boston is a team that offensively should get things turned around sooner rather than later. Seeing a large Mariners fade here today. Marco Gonzalez going up against Taylor Hearn. Taylor Hearn making his major league debut for the Rangers. Big strikeout numbers in the minor leagues. I guess maybe the expectation is to fade the Mariners against teams that can strike out, or against pitchers that can strike them out. I'm not on this game at all, but it was an interesting line move that I admittedly didn't take too deep of a dive into that game up until I saw that line move here prior to the show. My pick for today, I'm going to lay the number with Houston. I love Trevor Bauer. I guess it's a great matchup tonight between Trevor Bauer and Garrett Cole, but I think Cole has the higher ceiling because of the lineup that he's facing. The Astros have the superior lineup, have the superior bullpen. Bauer's been working very deep into games, running up that pitch count. I think Houston's going to have a good game plan for him tonight. I think he'll have a very good game plan for them as well. But I just don't see the Indians hitting Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole, he gives up the occasional home run, and that's that. The Indians are not hitting for much power here so far. I'm going to lay the number with the Astros. If this becomes a bullpen game, I like Houston. If it's a low-scoring game, I like Houston's chances to cash in more of those run-scoring opportunities. So give me the Astros here tonight. Again, big price in the minus 150 range, but that's about the only thing I like here on the abbreviated card for this evening. All right, so we'll preview the weekend ahead here. And speaking of the Indians and Astros, that's where I want to go. Bauer and Cole tonight, Kluber and McHugh on Friday, Bieber and Peacock Saturday, Carrasco and Miley on Sunday. We'll see how Carrasco fares with that bruised knee. The Indians draw the Sunday night baseball billing for the second week in a row. They're off on Monday. Houston goes to Minnesota, which could be a little bit of a trickier spot for them, but it's Justin Verlander going for Houston. He just shut down the Twins in his most recent start. We'll see if he does it again on Monday, but I don't think there's anything situationally coming out of Sunday night baseball unless it's some sort of deep extra inning game or something like that. But a lot of intriguing things about this series. The Indians' right-handed heavy rotation against that Houston right-handed heavy lineup, the four best for Cleveland, allegedly. Anyway, I think Clevenger is above Kluber now at this point in time. But the Indians with four righties to throw at that righty-heavy Houston lineup. I'll be looking to play the over tomorrow night with Corey Kluber against Colin McHugh. Kluber's got all kinds of problems. Colin McHugh dominates righties, as I've talked about before, but he's going to get 8 left-handed batters in that Indians lineup tomorrow. So I think McHugh's probably in line for some regression. I don't like Kluber at all. Minute Maid Park should be open again. So there's a little bit of a look ahead to a Friday pick. I'll take the over there in that Indians-Astros game. I'm guessing the total's 8.5. I'll be on the over there in that one. Rockies and the Braves. Antonio Senzatella and Max Fried on Friday. John Gray and Mike Foltynewicz on Saturday. Tyler Anderson, Kevin Gausman on Sunday. First start here of the year for Mike Foltynewicz, who was injured throughout spring training. That's always a worry for me. Going up against a positive regression guy in Sonny Gray. John Gray. One of these days I'll get the Grays right. 50 Shades of Gray, I guess, in Major League Baseball this year. But John Gray, positive regression guy, could be on the Rockies there on Saturday. We'll have to see what that price looks like. Obviously, nobody likes Tyler Anderson. And I think the Braves are probably going to have a lot of success against left-handed pitchers this year. So may look for an over, a first 5 over, a team total over, something like that with Sunday's game down in Atlanta. Padres and the Nationals here. Long trip for San Diego. You've got Matt Strahm and Max Scherzer on Friday. I'm going to go ahead and put a call on this right now. Max Scherzer's on no-hitter watch on Friday. This Padres lineup, as I've mentioned before, they're just not good against right-handed pitchers. And anybody worth their salt as a right-handed pitcher has shut them down. Max Scherzer is probably the best right-handed pitcher in Major League Baseball. So this is a very bad spot for San Diego. The line will be hefty, but I probably wouldn't be allergic to the chalk here. I think Padres team total first 5 is an under. Maybe the first 5 under for the game, although the Nationals hit left-handed pitching very, very well. I think Max Scherzer dominates this lineup on Friday. So however you want to do that, a strikeout prop, a team total under prop, first 5 team total under prop, I think Scherzer dominates on Friday. Eric Lauer, Steven Strasburg on Saturday. Strasburg, again, has the opportunity to dominate this lineup. Then Joey Lucchesi and Jeremy Hellickson on Sunday. But again, those first 2 games, very brutal for the Padres here with Scherzer and Strasburg. Nationals get 3 lefties, but they're batting .304, .374, .516 against lefties here on the season. So maybe another way to play Friday night as a run line on the Nationals with Scherzer in what should be a dominant position against the Nationals lineup that hits lefties very well. That could be an option there for Friday also. Finally, one more series to take a look at here. The Rays and the Red Sox as they move outside to Fenway Park. Charlie Morton, David Price Friday. Tyler Glasnow to be determined on Saturday. to be determined against Chris Sale on Sunday. Obviously, not a whole lot to say with all the rotation blanks in this series, but I can tell you that I'm buying Boston's offense to break out here sooner rather than later. I don't know if it happens against Charlie Morton and Tyler Glasnow. It would not surprise me if it did. Boston team is very much on my radar, and with some reasonable prices here in this series against the Rays, I may end up taking some shots on Boston in this series. I don't know if I'll fall for Chris Sale again on Sunday, but maybe Friday with Charlie Morton and David Price, maybe that's one where I will take a look at the Red Sox. So, again, I'm looking for opportunities to buy them because I know that offense is going to get better from a price standpoint and also from an opponent's standpoint. I'll be back once again here on Monday with another edition of the Bettor's Box, including the Monday mailbag at Skating Tripods on Twitter or Adam@bangthebook.com to send me questions. Also, Adam@bangthebook.com if you want to get on the list for notes. We'll have a Kentucky Derby podcast next week with Brian Blessing. And also here, probably record today for tomorrow with Christian Pina about the UFC card coming up this weekend. So lots of stuff still going on here on Bang the Book Radio and also over at bangthebook.com. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. And remember that you'll never strike out when you're in the Bettor's Box.